Okay, I have one memory as a kid. My mom and I were walking around the grocery store, and every once in a while, she would stop, and she would explain to me which fruits were ripe and which ones weren't. Then, she grabbed one of those little clear plastic bags, ripped it off, set the fruit inside, and tied a knot. Now, at the time I was young, I was like 4, but I wanted to learn everything. I would always follow in her footsteps. So I asked her to teach me how to tie the knot. I was basically sitting on the floor in the middle of this grocery store, and I didn't care how long it took me to finish to tie this bag. I didn't care how difficult it was. All I wanted to learn was how to complete it. And my mom sat on the floor with me, and I asked her recently why she sat on the floor. And she said I was so determined, she knew I wasn't going to get up until I finished. And I think back, and I was like, she's right. I always had the same qualities as a kid. But so fast forward a little bit, and it was about 2009, and I began blogging. And I picked it up as just a way to express myself. I didn't do it for any other reason, just to keep myself busy and out of trouble, because I was a little, crazy when I was a kid. But the biggest thing was, my thing was that I was just a regular girl who liked fashion, and I didn't really know what I was doing other than just taking pictures of myself, posting them on the internet, and watching people respond back to it. And social media was entirely different than it was back then. Instagram wasn't even around. There was maybe only 2 or 3 platforms back then. And I just kept posting and posting, and all of a sudden I had 12 new followers. Now most people would be like, only 12 new followers, but for me, I was so excited that 12 people I didn't know wanted to follow me. And out of those 12 comments, there's one that really stood out. I had one girl, she wrote me saying that her whole family had a history of anorexia, and that after seeing my photos, she felt like she could finally live. And that seeing how confident I was in my body made her feel like she also could be too. So at that time, I didn't really think I was being an inspiration. Like I said, I was just blogging to keep myself busy. And it sort of just happened with time. And then around that time, I was going to college full-time. I was super busy. And I was working at a small Middle Eastern restaurant in the food court. And I just loved fashion. I didn't have a lot of money, so I went to the thrift shops, and I would shop because the clothes were less expensive, and retail stores didn't really have my size. So I would remix the outfits and, just put them together in my head, and I decided that I wanted to apply for a school in New York City, a really reputable college there. And I submitted my portfolio, and I waited for them to get back to me, but in the meantime, I had gotten an email from 17 Magazine, and they reached out to me asking if I could model for them. And at the time, I was living in Florida. I wasn't in New York, but I lied, and I said I was in New York and just bought a $400 ticket to go there. And I shot with them as the curvy girl for their magazine, and then I flew back to Florida. And then after that, I submitted myself into a modeling contest, and then I won it, and then I flew to Los Angeles to shoot with them. And then after that, I got my paycheck from the modeling gig that I won the contest from, and it was $1,000. And I remember thinking to myself, I can't believe I have a $1,000 check just from taking pictures of myself. I was used to making a minimum wage job, which was like $8.50 at the time. And I was just shocked that I could make this much money from basically doing nothing. So I went back to Florida, and around that time, my approval for my letter came in. And I remember getting it, my sister handed it to me. I shut the door, I locked it. I sat down on the bed, and I opened up the letter. And all my eyes drifted toward was the word unfortunately. And unfortunately is one of those words you never really want to hear, well, in this instance, read. And I just remember going blank in the face. I didn't have any emotions. I didn't cry. I didn't do anything at first, but just literally stare at the wall and just think to myself, I can't believe all my plans that I planned were ruined. And I didn't have emotion. I let myself just live in that moment. And then I let like 10 minutes go by, and then I just started crying. Crying turned into anger. And literally a week later, the magazine came in from 17, where my feature was in. And I saw it, and it put a new thought in my brain. And I thought, I need to adapt to my new situation. I've never seen myself in a magazine before, and now that I did, I thought maybe I can make this work some other way. Maybe I don't need to go to school, be in debt, and not be able to, succeed in that way, so maybe I could find out another way. Then, I literally went to my parents, and I'm like, listen, picture this. Me moving to New York within 2 weeks. And they're like, I think you could do it. So I packed my bag, which was mostly shoes at that time. I packed my bag, I packed my car, and I drove up to New York City by myself. And stopped at my brother's house on the way. I got to New York, and I rented a small studio apartment in Harlem on 152nd Street. And I landed a small job also. It was blogging for another company, and I didn't really want to blog for anyone else but me, but I knew I needed to work a 9 to 5 to be able to pay my bills. So I did that, and I kept working and working for them, and then at nighttime, I would work on my own blog, pitch myself to brands. I'd go to events, just trying to get my name out there and try to make a name for myself. And then all of a sudden, this amazing brand that I wanted to build a relationship with invited me to London. And I'd never been out the country, so I'm like saying yes before I even asked my job. So I said yes, and then I tell my job, like, hey, I need a week off of work because I'm going to London, and they were kind of like, no, that's not gonna be a thing, so they fired me, which is totally understandable, but I wanted to follow my passion and do what I really loved doing, and I didn't want to have a boss. I wanted to work for myself. So I went to London anyway because I got fired, so why not? And then when I got there, I built such a strong relationship with them, flew back, and then maybe a year or so later, it paid off because myself and that brand in London launched our first capsule collection. It was my first design project. I hadn't done anything like this before. It was the brand's first design project as well. And we launched it, and following right after that, I did my second design project with another company. And we launched at New York Fashion Week. My clothing went down the runway. I was mentioned as a designer, which was something that had never happened before. And on top of that, it got featured in, they had all the clothing in stores from Lord & Taylor and Nordstrom, which were two of the biggest department stores back then. And I just kept thinking, this is crazy because 5, 6 years ago, I was in those same department stores and I couldn't find anything that was plus size or that fit me. And now here I was designing pieces that were actually being shown in the store. So I'm glad that I did those capsule collections because I learned whatever I could at the moment to set me up for what was next. And I was on a mission to design my own line because I wanted to do it myself like I told myself I would 6 years ago. So I saved up all my money. I did sponsorships. I faked like I was my own manager for like 3, 4 years because no agency would sign me because I was too short. I'm only 5'3", but my heels are faking it. But I just saved up my own money, and I took what I learned from these companies, and in January 2017, I ended up launching my own clothing line that was size inclusive. It's called by Nadia Aboulhosn, and that's my story. And I basically think back to when I was a kid, like that 4-year-old girl in the grocery store where, I had everything inside of me to be who I am today. I had everything inside of me to reach my full potential. And I had determination when I was sitting on the floor, and I had stubbornness, and I didn't want to give up, and I had a great support system. My mom was there. My whole family is super supportive. And my story evolved as I got older, but my foundation always stayed the same aspects that helped me get to where I needed to be. And I strongly believe that everyone has instilled in them what it takes to get to that point. Thank you guys so much.